Hi, in this tutorial we are going to go over how to use arrays of objects. So as you can see, I have already created a student class here. So we're going to work with student objects. So my student I have consists of a name, an age, and a GPA. I have methods to get their name, age, and GPA, set their name, age, and GPA, and then a simple two-string method as well. So the first thing we need to do is create an array of these objects. And there are a couple different ways to do this. One way would be to create all the objects first and then create the array and put them in the array. Or I could say, for example, student, we'll say first class or first hour. And we need to indicate that this is going to be an array of students equals new student. And then let's say I have 30 kids. I'm not going to fill that whole array up. But I could create then a student object. So I could say student obj1 equals new student. And then when I create a new student, this student needs a name, Mark, 16, GPA 3.7. So I'm just creating separate student objects. obj2 equals new student. Linda, she's 14 and she's got a GPA of 3.9. Okay, so created two student objects. So I could say first hour bracket 0 equals obj1 and first hour bracket 1 equals obj2. So that would be one way to do it. Kind of tedious. Another way to do it would be to just fill it when you create it. So we'll call this one second hour. And instead of creating the empty array list first, which is what I did up here, and by the way, before you fill them with students, they're all just going to be null is what they'll be filled with. So our first hour array would have Mark in spot 1 and Linda, or spot 0 and Linda in spot 1, and then everything else after it would be null. So for second hour, I'm just going to go ahead and add the students right from the get-go. So I'm going to say equals new student, Bob, 15, 3.7, new student. So notice that in between each element, I'm putting in a comma, but I'm literally adding an entire object all at once to that array. So another new student, Pete, 16, 3.8, new student, Sandy, 16, 3.5. Let's do one more. Student, we'll go with Carol, who is 17 and she's got a 3.9. Okay, so I have a student, I have an array of second hour that is filled with 4 students. So we'll keep it. And you can obviously add as many as you needed to, but you can see that when you're working with objects, it's a little bit more tedious to fill that array. So, all right. So the first thing I'm going to just talk about is how do we go through this and, get information out that we might need or print whatever we want. So I'm going to need a for loop, just like always. So for in I equals 0, I is less than second hour dot length, I plus plus. And let's say I simply want to print the name of each student out. So I can just say system.out.println. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So when I do this, I need to remember that my array has full student objects in them. not just their names, it's got the whole object. So 15-year-old Bob with a 3.7 GPA, if you want to almost envision that as being an actual person just standing there, that's what the array is holding. We only want the name of that person. So the first thing I need to do is to get the person out of the array. So I'm going to say second hour bracket I, right? Just like we would with any other array. To pull an element out, we'd use bracket I with our for loop. But now I don't want the whole person. I just want his name. So this is where I go back. Now that I have the object out, what method in here would allow me to just get that student's name? And you can see right here that I have the getName method, which would return only that student's name. So now that I've pulled the full student out, the next thing I need to do is call the appropriate method that would get that student's name. And so now if I run this, hopefully I don't have any typos. Okay, good. It is literally pulled out only the names of the 4 students that are in second hour. Okay, and just to kind of show you another thing, let's say I want to change the name of one of them, or let's say I want to change one of their ages. So I would have to say second hour bracket. Let's say I'm going to change the age of whoever's in spot 1, which is Pete, and he's not 16 now, he's now 17. So I have to say second hour bracket 1. That's getting the object out. Now I got to figure out, okay, what method for the object would allow me to reset an age? And I have this method called setAge. So I'm going to say second hour bracket 1 dot set age, and then in parentheses I'm going to put in 17. So this notation pulls the object itself out, and then you're always going to have something after it with the method that you're calling. Okay, and so that's setting the age of, who was it, Pete. And then just to do one more example with you, just to kind of try to help you solidify this, let's say I want to find their GPA. I want to find the maximum GPA of the group. So I'm going to create a variable called max, and I'm going to set it equal to 0 because we know GPA is not going to be negative. So we're safe setting this one to 0. And I'm going to use an enhanced for loop this time. So with my enhanced for loop, since I am going through a student array, the type is going to be student. The next thing is what I want to call the object. So I'll just call it studObj, student object. And the name of the array I want to go through is second hour. So now instead of using the bracket I notation to pull an element out, I can just use studObj. So I'm going to check to see if max is less than studObj. Now, this is again where we have to be careful. studObj represents the entire student. I only need their GPA. So I need to use the .get GPA method to get their GPA. So if max is less than that, then max is going to be equal to studObj.get GPA. Right, so if the max is something smaller than that student's GPA, then that becomes our new max. And then just to check my work here, we would hope that it prints out 3.9, right, when we're done running this. And you can see that it did. So a couple different ways. We can use our traditional for loop. We can use our enhanced for loop. But the biggest thing that you need to remember is that when you're working with arrays of objects, it's a 2-step process. The first step is to pull the object out using the correct notation. So array name bracket I if we're in a traditional loop. And then the second step is to call whatever the appropriate method is for whatever you're trying to do. So I tried to show you a couple different ones. Here I just want their name, so I use the method getName. Here I just needed their GPA, so I used getGPA. Here I wanted to change an age, so I used setAge. So a 2-step process. getting the object out of the array, and then calling the appropriate method for it. And that's a quick intro to arrays of objects.